Thank you very much for joining us. This side event is organized by Ministry of the Environment, Japan, MOEJ, in close collaboration with the International Institute for Applied System Analysis, so-called IIASA. By the way, this side event is the very first event to be organized here in Japan Pavilion. In this regard, I'm very happy to welcome you to this side event to launch IIASA Japan research project on city transformation toward the contribution to the IPCC special report on cities. Now, first, let me invite Mr. Mizutani, Director of the Ministry of the Environment, to open this side event. May I ask you to take the floor? Mr. Mizutani, please.
Distinguished participants, good morning. I'm Yoshiro Mizutani, Director for International Cooperation, Ministry of the Environment, Japan. Thank you very much for joining us today at the launch event of the IIASA Japan joint project on cities. So as Professor Takemoto said, this is the first side event of the Japanese Pavilion at COP28. Ministry of the Environment has provided financial contribution to the IIASA for a long time and has conducted various joint research on environmental issues. The IPCC has just started its seventh assessment cycle and is scheduled to prepare and publish a special report on cities and climate change. Ministry of the Environment has been promoting initiatives on cities and demand-side measures, including decarbonization leading areas in Japan and city-to-city collaboration projects as international cooperation. It is important for us to contribute to the decarbonization of the urban sector by reflecting the good practice of such initiatives and results into the scientific findings of the IPCC. And to this end, IIASA and the Ministry of the Environment have launched a joint project on cities this year, taking advantage of their cooperative relationship. Ministry of the Environment and IIASA is serving as the secretariat for the project. And the IPCC Vice Chair and the working group, two co-chairs of both AR6 and AR7 will participate in the project with a view to providing knowledge and good practices to the IPCC AR7 special report on cities. The results of this research project will be summarized in a workshop to be held in Tokyo in February next year and an open seminar. Today, Professor Takemoto of the University of Tokyo, who is leading this joint project, will facilitating this launching event. And I've the honor to announce that the Dr. Winston Cho, IPCC Working Group 2 co-chair, and Mr. Keiman Riahi, IIASA Program Director, will kindly deliver keynote speeches from their respective perspectives. After that, we will have the brief presentations by Mr. Lerier from IIASA and Professor Yamagata from Keio University and Mr. Eric Zassman from IGS will also join the panel discussion on climate change and the cities. So also, we look forward to hearing your views and questions from distinct participants. Finally, I hope this launch event will be a fruitful opportunity and to think about climate change and the cities today. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mizutani, for your kind message as the opening remarks. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let us move on to the next program, which consists of two keynote speeches. First, let me invite Dr. Winston Cho. He is IPCC AR7 Working Group 2 co-chairs, and he is going to share with us IPCC AR7 and its special report. And let me invite Dr. Cho. Please, you have the floor, please.
Okay, thank you. Give us a second while we get the Zoom magic up and running so everybody can see that online and here on stage. Wonderful, looks good. Okay, hopefully this works. Right, good morning to everyone here in the Japan Pavilion and good afternoon to everybody listening in Japan. Yes, it's definitely an honor and privilege to be part of this event. I am Winston Chow. I am the co-chair of Working Group 2 for this assessment cycle. Previously for AR6, I was a lead author in the Cities chapter in Working Group 2, and I'm based at the Singapore Management University. I'm also participating here with the Singapore delegation across the boulevard and also with the IPCC WMO Science for Action Pavilion, which is at Block B7. With that all said, again, I have to mention that I hold in deep respect the great amount of urban-related work that has been that originates from Japan. It has been a great amount of literature for assessments done in AR6, and I would definitely hope that it will continue for AR7. So in my keynote, I will be speaking a bit about a history lesson. What has happened in the past, what has gone on in the present with AR6, and pivot towards a future of AR7, where, as mentioned, there is that special report on climate change and cities that we in Working Group 2 are taking the lead for, and we hope to deliver a very good assessment of what the importance of cities and climate change by the end of 2026. But if we look back at the IPCC process, before AR6, in AR5, the city coverage, the coverage of what happens in settlements and the key infrastructure embedded in it was quite sparse across the three working groups. Working Group 1, there was only a single mention of what role cities played in terms of the physical interactions with the climate system. In Working Group 2, there were 3 chapters on human settlements, industry, and infrastructure, including one dedicated chapter on urban areas, from which my predecessor, Professor Deborah Roberts from South Africa, was a lead author in, and she was co-chair for AR6. In Working Group 3, there were several chapters looking into human settlements, infrastructure, and spatial planning, embedded into one chapter, my apologies, but there were implicitly several urban chapters looking into the sectors like built environment, transport, and so on and so forth. But it was all very separated, piecemeal. It wasn't integrated well together. In AR6, moving on to the present day, in terms of the report that was released last year and this year, there was some good coverage of urban material across all the working groups. In Working Group 1, there was the physical analysis of how urban areas would be the link between global and regional climate change. There was a good focus in terms of how cities could impact inadvertently on the climate in terms of the heat island and temperature extremes. We know that if you convert natural areas into concrete and asphalt islands, so to speak, you have elevated temperatures that can, on top of the temperature extremes from climate change, can be rather detrimental and rather dangerous to vulnerable communities in cities. We noticed in the figure there that you can see on screen, the highlighted yellow box, it tried to partition the sort of detected regional warming together with the local warming that is present. And I focused that area because in East Asia and South Asia, a greater proportion of warming detected from the middle of the 20th century until today comes from that urbanization process. So we are in the part of the world where there's rapid urban growth, there's rapid settlement development, and there will be consequences to local climates, particularly from this urbanization process. In Working Group 1 as well, there was good coverage on the typical processes and trends within the local scale settlement and urban arena, looking into temperature changes, looking into how it links up with air pollution, and bringing that forward, this sort of climate-driven physical impacts, which then was covered in Working Group 2, in my chapter, and also embedded within the regional chapters in Asia, in Australia, Asia, small island states, North America, Europe, so on and so forth. Apart from the impacts of warmer temperatures, there was also a big focus in terms of how a lot of cities, in Japan is a great example, a lot of cities and settlements are located by the coast, and how this has their location and their growth together with their exposure to both sea level rise and other water-related hazards. You have pluvial floods that happen when sea level rise, increased rainfall, extreme rainfall, and you have much more flooding that occurs in settlements lying along the coast or in low-lying areas. This has obvious implications on how you can adapt to those eventual sea level rise related coastal risks, which we assessed in Working Group 2. This figure that you see here looks into the proportion and the absolute amounts of people who are living in such exposed areas, and the rough approximate time frame where the risks from future sea level rise and the associated flooding that can happen will happen in the future, with the darker colors indicating a closer event horizon for those coastal related water risks. One other feature that we note is that because you are putting two systems together in terms of cities and the climate system, oftentimes you have risks that compound together, or in the short term, or in the long term, they can cascade together. And that's something that emerged a lot in our assessment of impacts and risks related to cities and settlements and climate change. It's something that when we speak to policymakers on is a very big concern, because this gets to the problem of how the impacts are so near to us, and is there anything that can be done to reduce those urban related risks that emerges when you put cities and the climate systems together. The segue to that is that we point out that there are approaches in terms of adaptation that already exist. In the table on the right, we've pointed out or assessed about 22 different adaptation approaches grouped into gray and physical infrastructure, nature-based solutions, and planning and social policies, and those three vertical columns on the right. And we linked that or assessed the sort of adaptation options with how it relates to climate resilient development. This speaks to the combination or the integration of adaptation with mitigation, as well as with biodiversity conservation, and lastly, the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, I understand that there'll be two very esteemed speakers who speak to this sort of integration later on, and I will urge you all to hear the importance of linking adaptation, not just for its own sake, but how when you combine these approaches together under the framework of climate resilient development, you get a lot of very important reduction of risks in cities. In Working Group 3, there was also the importance of how these sort of approaches can be linked together, the integration of adaptation and mitigation, with a dedicated urban systems chapter. And also, again, this was repeated in sectoral chapters for building, transport, industry. In Working Group 2 and 3, we also had a shared cross-working group box. So we no longer just look or partition the assessments in terms of science, impacts and vulnerability, adaptation, mitigation, sustainable development. We've begun to start looking into the integration and linkages of how cities can affect climate change and how climate change can affect cities. One good example of that from chapter 8 is the figure on the right that looks into the mitigation benefits and the adaptation co-benefits of green and blue infrastructure that you can develop and implement in many cities around the world, including several in Japan. Finally, in the synthesis report that combines everything together, there was 18 mentions of urban in the summary for policymakers text that talks in terms of how the risks will increase over time with the burning embers diagram that you can see on the left, but also good avenues for climate action in terms of solutions, building up this or focusing on this solution space that cities are embedded in and can help make a difference in keeping to a 1.5 degrees C world. Good examples include the demand side interventions on the figure on the bottom left that chapter 8 was assessing in Working Group 3, as well as a summary of these sort of actions and the reductions of greenhouse gas emissions that you can see on the table on the right. And the focus again is that cities can make a difference. The action in cities can make a big difference in adaptation and mitigation of climate change. So that's the present state of knowledge from AR6. Moving on to the future. As pointed out, we do have a special report on climate change at cities that is in the works. It was actually approved in the last assessment cycle, not this assessment cycle. It had big support from governments, it had big support from UN Habitat, as well as very key important practitioner communities in the C40 cities group, ICLE, local governments and GCOM. These communities felt that the sort of targeted, curated assessments in cities can be deployed by mayors, can be deployed by practitioners, by regional governments, rather than at the national level. The report will include contributions from all working groups. It will expand upon that integration element I mentioned earlier. Administratively, it will be led by my working group together with Professor Bart van den Hoek from the Netherlands and myself, and our very esteemed bureau in working group 2. There is a nomination process for experts to help scope this report. As much as I would like to dictate what is in the report, I can't do so per the IPCC process. We rely on experts, and these experts are not just from the academic community, as you'll see in the next slide. It involves contributions from the practitioner community and from the civil society communities as well. The nomination process has just recently ended. We have, I can tell you now, we have about 1,300 nominations. In previous assessment cycles for special reports, we only had about 500 to 600. So 1,300 people who are, it tells you the immense amount of interest there is for this special report on cities. So what we were looking out for were along 6 key themes. We will look for experts who are familiar with the biophysical aspects of cities, how the physical system affects cities and vice versa. We looked at experts who knew what would happen in terms of the economic and non-economic losses and damages, as well as the compounding and cascading impacts and risks that happens in cities when under a warming world. We looked at how sectoral development, adaptation, mitigation, and the responses to losses and damages can occur for the built environment, for transport, for industry, and so on and so forth that we see in cities. We looked at energy and emissions that occur both within cities and in the peri-urban areas. We are cognizant that what happens in cities doesn't necessarily stay in cities. We've seen that happen with a lot of supply chain disruptions when a flood event happens or a tropical cyclone happens along a coastal city. We look into the importance of how governance structures, how policies, how institutions can help to plan, and particularly the enabling conditions for finance in adaptation and mitigation can happen in cities. And lastly, we look into the role of civil societies within cities. We fully acknowledge that indigenous and local knowledge is critical to complement the scientific research and the practitioner research that happens in cities, and it can help to enable this solution space that we want to focus on in AR7. Again, so the point we want to make is that it's not just focused on one working group. We are now moving towards the age of an integrative approach across working groups 1, 2, and 3 that can help inform and give a better sort of special report for a bigger audience, particularly that in the urban or the settlement community. We know that the audience is that it's not just governments at the federal or the state level, but at subnational levels, at municipal levels, because these are the governments who will take into account what we provide, this information. This science-based information can then help determine good policies that can reduce climate risk and enable that 1.5 degree C world to happen. So the point is that we need to look into policy relevant information that's coherent on climate action. So I've mentioned that the nomination process has concluded. We will be hosting a scoping expert meeting sometime in April of next year, where the outline will be finalized, where the narrative of the report will be finalized, and it will be reviewed in the next approval plenary session for the IPCC that will take place third quarter of 2024. The timeline is that if everything goes according to plan, knock on wood, we should have that special report on cities be available by the end of 2026. So with that all said, thank you very much for listening, and I hope this spurs the discussion, especially in every urban group, to help to contribute to develop scientific research so that this assessment for the special report on cities can be the most robust one possible and can really help in enabling a climate resilient future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Winston, for your presentation, which has covered wide range of perspectives, in particular, previous development at the AR5 and 6, and toward the next step, the AR7 in particular, special report on climate change in the cities. Now, let me invite next speaker. She's from IIASA, as the research scholar, the Dr. Leila Niamia, and she is taking the lead in developing the report on cities transformation toward the contribution to special report, IPCC special report as described right before by Winston. Now, Leila, you have the floor, please.
So good morning, everyone, and people in online. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. My name is Leila. I'm based at IIASA in Austria, and there actually I'm doing leading this city transformation project together with Keivan Riyahi, who will be also online for our panel. In the last cycle of the IPCC, I was the lead author of the working group 3, focusing on the demand side energy. And that's actually brought me also in a synthesis report. And I'm happy that Winston also showed the figure of the demand side, which I was on the lead on that. Yes. So I'm coming from the demand side perspective, also the cities actually is very play important role. And that's why I'm going toward that. Winston already provided lots of information about what we did actually in the last cycle of the IPCC in a working group 2 from the adaptation and working group 3 from the mitigation perspective. And now actually today I want to a little bit talk about what's our project and how we want to contribute to the next cycle of the IPCC, particularly the cities report. When we are talking about when we are talking about the cities transformation, you might come, all these pictures might in your mind. Depends that where you are living or where you come from originally, you have a different opinion. Some of the cities are really struggling with a climate hazard, like floods and lots of other climate risk. And some other cities trying to develop toward a better mitigation or basically through more green areas and etc. And still we have some cities that struggling with the basic needs like slums and other issues that they have. So as you see, there is a heterogeneous way of looking through the cities, and that's brought a unique looking through that concept. So why we, within the IIASA and the Ministry of Environment in Japan, we would like to focus on the cities because climate and energy crisis is affected millions of the people. And half of this population lives in the cities. And cities is actually a center for resource. And basically, they are most consumers of all the resources. In a previous cycle of the IPCC, we had a clear message. From adaptation perspective, we see that the cities will be faced with a steep rise in a climate hazard. And also in working group 3, which is a mitigation, we see that basically the urban areas shares a lot of greenhouse gas emission that actually is quite increasing over the years. For example, the statistics shows, and in 2015, we have around 62% of the global greenhouse gas emission come from cities. And just within 5 years, we have a huge increase reached to 72%. And this is actually the message that we should really think about strategies in our cities. And another important point that I want to raise is that about the equity perspective. And all these things that we are talking about, the climate adaptation and mitigation, all the people that facing a climate hazard in the cities, and also the particularly that how basically dealing with the mitigation is not equally distributed in the cities over the world. So that actually makes also another unique point for the cities. basically, I try to put my opinions actually through these things and where we do need more greater attention when you are looking to the cities. Couple of points comes in my mind and I put it there, and actually this is something that through this great project we would like to expand it and bring it with better literature on that. The first point is that we are lacking from the comprehensive view and assessment about the cities. We have a brilliant studies, but scatters over the different cities, and there's no harmony or the pattern of that. There's a lots of empirical studies, scenarios, and etc., but it's very scattered, all the different cities, but we do need to have a comprehensive and basically more in-depth studies in cities. And particularly, I would like to emphasize on the global side, South cases, and then basically improvement, where actually cities actually now in a process of developing. The second point that I want to talk about is measures and scenarios. Still, we are struggling with the measures, and basically, particularly when we are talking about the loss and damages, the metric is missing. We should really look through that and come up with a better idea that how we can measure and assess about the loss and damages, and also from the mitigation perspective about the costs and potentials of the strategies that we are taking. And here again, I would like to go to my area of the demand side, and particularly looking to the social aspects. We have a huge potential there, but still we don't have enough understanding or basically data or assessment to see what's exactly the potential of these strategies and how much it costs. In our last report, actually, we show that with the demand side mitigation strategies, with the lower cost, we can actually reduce greenhouse gas emission in a huge amount. Also, when we are talking about the measures and scenarios, we should also emphasize on the synergies and trades-off between the different strategies that we are looking at, also linking to the human health and well-being. The next point that is also very in line with what Vincent also mentioned, that cities, we cannot look to mitigation and adaptation separately. They are very much interlinked. And therefore, we do need to have a whole system view that looking through the merging of the adaptation and mitigations strategies. So we do need looking for a systems transformation, and particularly cross-sectoral things. It's very perfect that we are looking to the transport separately to the buildings, but in the cities, actually, there is something that these sectors are really interlinked, and we should look through the strategies that look through the potential of the interlinkage of these strategies over the transport, buildings, and food. Last but not least, for these specifically report, we do need an interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary collaboration. Not only within the scientists, we do need a strong collaboration between economy, social scientists, urban planners, and et cetera, We do need to go beyond the science, working with the municipalities, practitioners, and this is great to hear that from the IPCC also this text is over, and they are opening this scoping and also contributing from the practitioners and municipalities next to the scientists. That would be great basically way to go. I would like to emphasize and who is responsible, who should do that, and how we should that. Each of us are responsible, and if we want to have a good transformation, all of us has a role. As a scientist, we do need to have a better understanding, work on assessment, measures, and etc. to produce knowledge and come up with a proposal of what would be the best strategy for cities transformation. We do need to close collaboration with policymakers and municipality to make sure that we assign the feasible policy and scenarios for our future. We do need to talk to investors, urban designers, engineers, businesses, even citizens and youth, because all of us, with a different role that we have in a society, we can play an important role. For example, with bringing the awareness citizen by behavior and lifestyle changes, they could help for the city's transformation. The important point is that for this particular point, I just say that this is a close collaboration between all the basically individuals in a city, and basically this brings the multi-level governance view that for better and then faster or enhancing this transition, we do need a multi-level governance to bring all the stakeholders around the table. So I little bit want to teaser about our project. IIASA and Japan City Transformation Projects is a project that we would like to, basically we already kick off this project. There is a huge number of the authors involving. Little bit I will teaser that our report basically consists of them 5 main basically topics. We are talking about the urban systems, urban typologies, and about the different like informal settlements and etc. Jumping to the impacts and risks, basically I can say it mostly to the lens of the climate change adaptation perspective. We deeply look into the system transformation, not only the sectoral perspective, looking to the transport, mobility, and etc., but also looking through the connection between the systems. In the next section, we are looking to the enabling conditions, particularly talking about the innovation, behavior, and lifestyle changes, and then also kind of looking through the technology and innovation perspective, particularly, for example, like the role of the digitalization and smart cities, and etc. Last but not least, that we very close to our heart, talking about the synergies and trades of how much these basically different strategies could impact on a human health and well-being. How is the relation between the SDGs and etc. that Eric in the next talk also dive more deep on this topic perfectly. So I just want to give the overview of our report and who we are. Basically, we are an international team. Currently we have around 30 authors and experts. There are also practitioners. We all invited them because we would like to also have some basically case studies. We visualize as a boxes, so basically the best practices and then case studies that we have in the different cities. So we invited also the experts in that perspective. Majority of us are actually at IIASA or basically in a Japan different institute, but also we go beyond that. We have also lots of guests and basically contributing authors from the US and also Global South, India, and etc. What we do basically in this phase by February that we will launch this report, we are synthesizing the current knowledge of the urban transformation and importantly, identify the critical knowledge gaps. And actually the plan is that after that, we are going deep dive in all these critical knowledge gaps and try to jointly with a collaboration, produce enough knowledge to be fed in the IPCC. And how we are doing, of course, we are looking to the literature review, but the unique point of this report would be that we are looking to the case studies, novel methods, and best practices and a concept that we have, or even I can say the failures. Always we are looking to the best practices, but we are forgetting about the, for example, the failures that we had, or what one strategy or two strategy didn't work in the cities. And last but not least, that we are very proud of that, we try to identify the key experts in the cities and cities transformation, and we will have a deep interview with them. And we are collecting that also in part of the literature, because we believe that all of these things may be in their head, but they're not really wrote down in a paper. So it would be great to have integration of these elements. So please stay tuned with us. We will have an international workshop in the end of the February in Tokyo, Japan, followed by a public symposium. Is open for everyone that officially we release this basically report. And here I would like to use the opportunity and thanks the Ministry of Environment and IIASA for basically supporting us for this project. And I really looking forward to have a follow-up projects to be perfectly fit to the IPCC. Last but not least, I also would like to thank contributing authors and experts that I reach out to them, and they are kindly involving in this report. And if you have any question or follow-up, feel free to shoot me an email or follow me in Twitter. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Leila, for your presentation. And your presentation has covered what we are going to do in the context of a contribution to the IPCC special report on cities, and also how we can develop the Japan IIASA joint research program. Thank you very much to keynote speakers for sharing your insight for the ideas, which is the very good basis for further discussion during a panel discussion today. Now, let us move on to next program, which is the panel discussion by inviting the online speakers, panelists, together with the resource persons from today, the Winston and Lena. Lena and Winston, could you take the floor, the seat on the stage for our panel discussion? And let me invite three speakers in addition to two keynote speakers. Let me introduce quickly the Professor Yamagata, Yoshiki Yamagata from Keio University. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you in Tokyo, Japan. Next, Dr. Eric Zassman, who is the senior researchers leader from the IIAS. Thank you very much for joining us. Then thirdly, Dr. Keiwan Liahi from IIASA as the program director to take the lead in this very important project. Thank you very much, three of you, to join us online. And together with the on-site two keynote speakers, we are going to discuss further based on the very good insightful presentation made by two keynote speakers. Now, I would like to share with you how we can move forward. First, let me invite the three online speakers, namely Professor Yamagata, Keio University, followed by Eric Zassman of IIAS. And after the presentation or remarks, let me invite Keiwan Liahi to have his own overviews and sharing your insightful observation. Now, let me invite Professor Yamagata for your initial remarks. Floor is yours, Professor Yamagata, please.
Hello. Thank you for your kind introduction. Let me share my slide. Let me shortly present about the overview of AR6, Chapter 8, Urban Systems and Other Settlements, and some prospects for AR7. I'm Yoshiki Yamagata, Keio University, and the lead author for the Chapter 8. So with just 3 slides, I'd like to summarize and mention the prospects, and executive summary for this is very simple. So although the urbanization is a global trend, it often leads to higher income and consumption. The increasing concentration of people and activity is an opportunity to increase resources, efficiencies, and decarbonization at scale. So achieving transformative change in cities for climate change mitigation adaptation requires engaging multiple scale of governance, including governments and non-state actors, and then linking them to substantive financing beyond sectoral approaches. This is a key message from the latest AR6 report. So AR6 was new since AR5, and because AR5 was the first IPCC report with separate chapter with the urban mitigation of climate change. And the main issues was the impact of urban form and infrastructure on facilitating climate change mitigation. And the suggestion was the urban form shapes urban energy consumption and the GHG emissions. And then in the AR6, we have discussed that the cities have been the focus of much attention in the work of IPCC, and elements that urgently need to change in the fundamental and transportable ways are our infrastructure, our land use and ecosystems, industry, and energy. Then this is some prospectus for the AR7 city report. And this special report on the city and climate change was already agreed before the beginning of the AR7, because as Winston already mentioned, global policymakers and practitioners co-hosted IPCC cities and climate change science conferences and already endorsed and agreed that AR7 special report on climate change and cities created. As far as we see it, this is not any decided outline, but this is our recommendation only. So there are two key points. First one is identify the key research priority as drivers of GHG emissions. So this includes need for comprehensive research approach, systems approaches to understanding sector interaction in cities, relationships to climate and other urban processes, achieving transformation toward a low carbon resilient future society. And the second point is items that should be covered as area of scientific research after the AR6 cycles, as the report addresses global policy issues. So these are large-scale governance, co-benefit, mitigation adaptations, and other city services, and green and blue infrastructure. This is forest and ocean, carbon sequestrations, infrastructures, and governance with green transformation and digital transformations, and finally, finance. So finally, let me just briefly address my personal observation for the last 20 years or 25 years. I have been participating in IPCC since the Kyoto Protocol was created. At the beginning, the national level commitment was very important. But gradually, over the last 20 years, we are more focusing on the implementation of mitigation and adaptation measures. And we need to achieve the target of the national level target as well as city level target, decarbonize by the year 2050. And then we start a discussion about global stocktake. Actually, we need to further decarbonize more. Maybe we need to set earlier target, earlier than the 2050, as far as the developed countries, advanced cities concerned. So the use of integration of GX and DX, making use of big data and even AI will be very important. And I hope this will also lead to the transformation in the future, so which is necessary to achieve the Paris Agreement goal. So with enough finance mechanism to achieve this goal need to be implemented at the city level. So these are the issues that I think that are important for this coming special report. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Yamagata, for your initial remarks. Let me come back to you after hearing now Sussman of IIASA, who is also the author of our project. Eric, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much. And I hope everybody is doing well in Dubai. So I'm going to reflect very briefly on some of the contributions to the ongoing report that Leila outlined in the framing presentation. And as she mentioned, this report really is broken up into 5 main sections. And I will talk a lot about this enabling conditions section and the synergies and trade-off sections, as I think they're two not only critical elements for pushing us forward and helping us achieve our climate ambitions, but I think they're quite related to each other. So first, the point I'd like to underline, and I think this is one of the messages that's coming out of the report, is that these synergies between many of the different targets and SDGs themselves can help accelerate transitions within cities. This very simple diagram highlights the potential synergies between the targets for SDG 11, which covers urban settlements, and then the remaining SDGs. And what you can see from this is there's not only a strong overlap with SDG 13 on climate change, but with many of the other development priorities, ranging from everything like SDG 14 and 15 on life below water and life on land, to things like equity concerns and gender empowerment, what have you. And I think this is important because it underlines that if we can generate those positive interactions in the form of synergies between these different areas, we can build powerful coalitions for change. We can also offset some of the costs of taking ambitious action. This is also a message that's underscored in this report in the corner of my slide, which is a report on synergies between climate change and SDGs that colleagues from IIASA as well as IJIS contributed to. Now, the other important point I'd like to underline is that many cities are recognizing these synergies. So this is becoming increasingly clear, both in climate action plans. So to the right here, you see some of the key elements of the climate action plan from a city called Niigata in Japan, and you can also see that they're closely linked to many of the SDGs. It's also evident in many different case studies. So as part of the work that IJIS does with the Ministry of Environment in Japan, we've compiled over 50 different case studies on co-benefits and plotted them on this map. And you can see, for instance, cases of co-benefits in places like Chongqing, China, Seoul, Korea, and many different cities and locations in Japan, as well as different parts of Southeast Asia. So these synergies are being recognized, and in some places they're actually being exploited and harnessed. Now, the other point I'd like to make is that cities will not be able to pull off this transformation alone. So one of the things that Japan has been actively promoting is an approach known as the regional circulating ecological sphere. And while that's a mouthful, what the concept really is focusing on is building collaboration and partnerships across urban and rural areas to capture linkages between climate change, biodiversity, circular economy goals. And in practice, what this might mean is, for instance, you can see this diagram right here, is, for instance, partnerships with localities in Nagano Prefecture and then more urban areas in Tokyo, where some of the power is being exported from Nagano to Tokyo to help, power urban development. And similar types of partnerships are also being developed in terms of renewable energy, where you have, more land available in more rural areas and higher energy demands in urban areas. So this approach also implies that we need to not only integrate across issues, but integrate across space. Now, of course, to push these more integrated approaches forward, we need a good set of enabling conditions. And colleagues have already mentioned this, but I will sort of underscore it because I think it's absolutely essential that we think a lot more about how to build stable, multi-sectoral, multi-level forms of governance. This might involve not only looking at some of the work on multi-level governance, but also some of Ostrom's work on polycentricity. And that's also going to be important for building not only sort of these sort of vertical and horizontal integration mechanisms, but also thinking about sort of more adaptive and reflexive forms of governance, especially in the face of crisis. And now the last point that I want to make is, while we think about sort of more vertical and horizontal integration in terms of our governance arrangements and institutions, there's two other things that I think we should also consider. One is a sort of political economy perspective. And many times I think the difficulties in creating these arrangements arise from the fact that there's a lot of times that the different agencies that are working on these issues, both at the local and also at the national level, are captured by vested interests. And sometimes we see this type of diagram we call an iron triangle, where you have collaboration, unfortunately, between the government and between different agencies, and then different industries that have a stake in continuing the sort of status quo. And so I think one of the ways to break up these iron triangles is to focus a lot more on this participation, or some people would call sort of the just transition, where we enable different social groups to actively participate in the climate process. And here I want to highlight an interesting example. There's many of these throughout the world now, but I went to school at the University of Texas at Austin many years ago, and their climate action plan is really, really unique in that it places a very strong emphasis on equity, and they employed a very interesting participatory approach by setting up climate advocates throughout the city to listen to the needs and concerns of different stakeholder groups. And I think this type of approach has a lot of legs. We see climate assemblies in Europe, and also in starting to get some traction in Japan. So as we move towards more sort of integrated forms of governance, I think it's also important to think a lot more about how we set up good participatory mechanisms that foster inclusion as well. So let me stop there, and thank you very much for the honor of allowing me to participate in this side event.
Thank you, Eric, for your initial remarks. And this is also the covering a very interesting the aspect of our joint program. Personally, in particular, I like the last slide on the challenging to break triangle, the iron triangle, but let us try to continue. But anyway, now let me invite the next speaker. He's from Vienna. He is the K1 Liahi. Thank you very much for joining us in such early in the morning Vienna time. Now, let me invite you to share your observation, overall observation, at the same time, any kind of indication as a challenge we face, or how we can move forward. Floor is yours, K1.
Yeah, thank you, Kazu. First of all, apologies that I cannot be with you in person, and also a big thanks to the Ministry of Environment Japan, but also IIASA for making this event possible, and also making it possible to write a report on cities, summarizing the state where we are at the moment and where the knowledge gaps are. It's almost like listening to the presentations. It's almost like preaching to the choir, but from my perspective, this research and also the special report in the IPCC on cities is of critical importance because of a number of different reasons. And first of all, I think thinking beyond mitigation and climate, cities have become the main point of social and economic development. Cities are the main point of innovations and have the potential to become the center of systems change. And cities are also the center of the built environment, which we need to fundamentally restructure. So everybody is recognizing that, but at the same time, and many of the talks alluded to it already, cities are very different in many ways. So they're different in terms of typologies, they're different in terms of risks that they imply, they're different in terms of preparedness and capacity to respond to climate change, for example, and also in terms of the resilience. And one factor that I want to really emphasize is, and that's also, I was really happy to hear from Winston that there will be practitioners and civil society also involved in the special report, is because of my experience as the scientific advisor of the city of Vienna. So in the city of Vienna, I'm working together So the city of Vienna has a net zero plan of 2040. Political level is very ambitious and really wants to achieve this. Operational level is extremely competent in the city and is actually a mutual learning process. However, what the city can do depends a lot on the competencies that we have at the city level and how the competencies are actually shared with the national level. So very often, many good ideas cannot be implemented because it's actually beyond the competencies of what can be decided at the city level. So all these governance issues that have been emphasized by Eric and this multi-layer governance is a real barrier in many of the cities at the moment, and particularly for cities who try to be more ambitious than the country itself, for example. So something to pay, I think, particular attention to, and having practitioners in the report who are aware about this, I think will help a lot. Yeah, I think I don't need to tell you about the big potentials that cities have in terms of, but when it comes to mitigation, because of the density of cities and also the much more the possibility to build up a much more efficient metabolism, and also because cities are demand centers, and to that they can steer what sort of products and to which extent also outside the cities, sustainability is basically in the minds of people. Yeah. So, but while I think perhaps the last point that I want to make is again related to our project, so to the Japan IIASA collaboration on the city report, is that while we recognize that there's a lot of research actually happening, and Leila mentioned this as well, I think there has been too little attention on city level assessments in a scientific, not assessment, city level research in the scientific community. And we hope that through this report and bringing it out very early coming year, we might set some incentives in the community to fill some of those gaps in time, even for the special reports. It's an ambitious task, but perhaps we can help fill some of those gaps and make and a constructive input into the IPCC report itself. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, K1, for your sharing the very good perspective and observation to move forward. Now, having heard that, let me invite the Winston to respond the K1 and the other speakers the presentation or remarks, and followed by the other speakers online, Professor Yamagata and Eric, and turn back to you later. And anyway, this is the general discussion, whatever. In particular, from my side, are there anything to expect the IIASA Japan research project? If you have anything to have the expectation, then please share with us your candid observation or expectation. But anyway, floor is yours. Winston.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? I hope. Yes. So I don't want to prejudice the scoping process by saying things that I say that specifically I want to include the report. That is best left up to the experts. When we've heard from 3 of them online just now about what are important criteria and what are important aspects to look out for scoping the special report, and fully acknowledge what was also mentioned. We are preaching to the choir here. Everyone in this room and pavilion, we know the importance, what's at stake, the important role that cities play, the important consequences that will face cities if we don't do anything. We hear about the issues, particularly on the equity side, which I really appreciate. I think Eric was mentioning that it's oftentimes not mentioned in a lot of urban action plans, and the sort of inclusivity aspect, the inclusion of diverse viewpoints and enabling them to be part of the action required to reduce climate risk is essential. So I think, that what was said is of immense importance. The last thing which I think maybe should have been pointed out is the urgency aspect that's required. We want to make sure that everything aligns towards the goals that have been set, that will be mentioned and has been already mentioned in previous COPs and in this COP. Time is running out. We need to really get all this action aligned together, coordinated together. Cities will play that important role in doing so. We've got targets in mind for 2030. The broader assessment, we pointed out that emissions have to be reduced globally by about 47%, almost 50% by 2030 to have a good chance of reaching that 1.5 degree C goal. We see the various sectoral engagements from the demand side and from the supply side, from Working Group 3 and integrated with Working Group 2 that can help enable that. And one other last point before I pass the mic back to you is that in a lot of previous assessments in the IPCC, there's been a big focus towards Working Group 2 and 3. Let's not forget that there's a huge amount of very high quality urban climate science that comes out from the physical science assessment in Working Group 1. There are vast advancements made in regional scale climate modeling in urban parameterization schemes, which I've mentioned, in my last visit in Japan. A lot of good work that comes from labs in Tokyo and elsewhere. There's been great advancements in terms of the Internet of Things, in terms of AI, in terms of looking at sensors embedded in cities to help obtain data. And that data are fundamental in terms of validating models or informing policymakers. And that scientific aspect is something that we hope can be drawn out, that can be researched as well over the next couple of years as we go forward in developing all the collective urban assessments that can lead to not just the special report on cities, but on the eventual assessment reports, the full ARs that the IPCC will develop over the next 7 years.
Thank you, Winston, for your response and also encouraging a message to us. Now, let me invite two speakers from Japan, the Professor Yamagata. And could you share with us any response after hearing from other speakers? At the same time, are there any your future commitment as a next step? Professor Yamagata, you are the scientist at the same time teaching the younger researchers. Now, in that capacity, could you share with us your future commitment, please, Yoshiki?
Thank you very much, Kazu-san. In fact, I'm very much encouraged by hearing that K1 mentioned about his involvement with the city of Vienna policy, and then the city actually setting the target of decarbonization 2040. That is very encouraging message. And so it is obvious that the decarbonization by 2050 targets that most cities already agreed is not proactive enough to actually decarbonize the whole global level 2050. So some leading cities need to set the target as early as 2040 or even earlier. I know some cities already 2035 is becoming the target. But I wonder how we can making a kind of innovation network for this early year target setting to 2040 coalition, for instance, can be kind of innovation, so propagating and the becoming a big movement in the world. So for some leading cities, maybe this is possible, but I wonder how we can make it a global scale movement that is enough to really achieve the goal. And then I'm very much impressed with working with my students, and they are Generation Z students, as you know. And they are very, very eager to achieve the decarbonization and the well-being of the cities. And actually, my students actually live until year 2100. That is amazing. So this climate change is really the issues for them. Unfortunately, we cannot live longer, and perhaps by the year 2050, I hope. But we need to decarbonize the cities by that time. And so my question is how we can do this modeling at the city level. Proactive modeling for the decarbonization can lead to the national level target setting. Maybe 3 years, later we can publish this AR7 special report of the cities, but can we have actually impact to the global national level target setting? I want to ask you how we can integrate this knowledge to your integrated assessment model, which can directly link to the national level target setting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Yamagata, for sharing your thought at the same time, sharing your concern or question to us, and which will be sought out through the future process in due course. Now, let me invite Eric. Could you please share with us any response or your commitment, if any? Please, Eric.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, this has been a fascinating discussion, and I have two questions actually. And one gets directly to this point about urgency, which I think Winston raised, and I think we all agree that the time is basically running out, and cities represent one of the places where we can move most quickly. But my question in this connection is that I also think, as I highlighted in my presentation, that we need to do this in an integrated fashion. We need to make connections across different sectors. We need to bring in different stakeholders. And I mean, we struggled with this a little bit in the last IPCC report, where there's so much emphasis on acceleration. I'm wondering how people feel about sort of this tension between trying to move quickly and accelerating action, but also trying to do so in a way where we're making all these connections across different sectors, and also including different stakeholders, because that could potentially slow things down. So sort of the tension between sort of speed and inclusion, or speed and integration. I just wanted to hear people's thoughts about that. And then my other question is directly for Keiwan, and it's, I think one of the nice things that we're seeing is that many of us are getting involved in the practice of climate planning, and Keiwan mentioned his work in Vienna. I'm just wondering, based upon that work that you're doing, what has been the biggest surprise when you sort of entered the room and started talking to constituents about what they want? How does that differ from what you might do in the rooms in IIASA?
Good. Thank you very much, Eric, for sharing your question. Now, let me ask Keiwan. Okay, let me ask Keiwan to respond if you have, please, Keiwan.
Yeah. So and there's a lot of difference in the discussion, of course, with the mayor and his team compared to discussions that we have at IIASA. But what I learned a lot about understanding the importance of that. It's even if you have the best technological solution that it is economic, it's a long way until this is actually implemented, and there are many barriers. Not only the social barriers, of course, that are there, and the social barriers one can work with by thinking about tailor-made policies that, for example, enhance equity while change systems. But then there are also bottlenecks that I didn't think that they would exist. So the city of Vienna wanted in 3 years to replace all gas boilers with either heat pumps or connect the city to a completely renewable district heating system. And it would have worked, but there were not enough engineers who can actually install those systems. And so so we adapted the plan, and the plan was then to much more increase the district heating system and build big industrial, geothermal, and other heat pumps outside of Vienna, because that was easier to build a big facility than to have these many companies install the granular system. So I think there's this gap between what might work and looks very economic and the best solution, and when you implement it in the practice, you need to be still flexible and don't forget the social constraints.
Thank you, K1, for your response. Now I am concerned about the timing, and to wrap up, before asking the Elena for wrapping up, Winston, do you have any quick response? Just quickly, and you have the floor, and then finally Leila. Yeah, Winston, you have, please.
Very quick 30-second answer to Eric's very important question about a path forward. How do we tackle this urgency? Short answer is I don't know. I don't think anyone knows, right? If that's the point about bringing together as much good quality urban research through not just academic aspects, but through the action plans, which Eric was pointing out as well, that a lot of them are regrettably not published in English, Spanish, in Chinese, and in other languages. If we can get these sort of plans in place, those that work and those that didn't work, which you rightly pointed out, we need that sort of thing as well. I think we can get a grasp of what, depending on the specific urban context, the local context, we can chart that path forward and try to negotiate that, cut that path to as short as possible to make sure that this urgency issue can be tackled. It won't be pretty. It definitely won't be perfect, but if it works, then I think that is a successful outcome that we can try and strive towards from all stakeholders, not just from us scientists or from practitioners or from governments or from local communities. But that, I think, is one way forward to answer that question that Eric posed earlier.
Thank you, Winston, for the kind response. Now, finally, let me invite Leila for your sort of wrapping up or the kind of next step as you thought in your mind in this regard, the Japan IIASA-JAPAN, the joint research program. Please, you have the floor, please.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, it would be very difficult to wrap up all these great information. But actually, I just want to show my enthusiasm that see how much we have overlap. I mean, we are also thinking about all the concerns that we think that is so super important about the equity, about the governance, inclusion, and all these things that's very important. 2 points that I would like to raise that maybe it would be also call for everyone. We are talking about that we do need a comprehensive view, inclusion, and all these things. And you also mentioned about that there is actually data exists, but these are different languages, it's hidden in somewhere, but we do need all of us look through these great initiatives, extract all this information. For example, for the demand side management that I was working, we had a lot of struggle with the scenarios that coming from the cities. And we thought that maybe there is no knowledge. But when we deep dive in all the literature, we found that there is a huge potential and then literature exists, but in a different languages. So this is really need a collaboration to bring all this information out. Translate it usually happens in the small initiatives or small projects, but we do need to translate it and help to the scientists to come up with a better estimation scenarios for future, to come up with a better policy settings. So this would be one way to look through it. And then, for example, through the K1's mentioned about the Vienna initiative that they basically working on the city of Vienna, I get to learn more about the practitioners. For example, they are working on a risk management. And that's why K1 introduced me to invite them to basically to our report, because these are small kind of initiatives, but is a very successful, impactful, and might also apply to other cities and other cases. So it would be important to gather all this information, and with the help of everyone, is not just the scientists or just the policymakers, everyone, and this is also links to what Eric mentioned about the governance in the different levels and also intersectoral connections. So yeah, I'm wrapping up here. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Leila, for your the kind of a very concrete observation, and we are very clear in the position to move forward based on today's discussion. Today, once again, this event is to launch our joint program, IIASA-Japan research project on cities toward the contribution to IPCC. It is a very good start, and we are very much excited to move forward. Thank you very much to all of you keynote speakers at the same time, online these speakers. Please join me thanking to all of them. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let us conclude this event. At the same time, as I said, this event is really the first event of the Japan Pavilion. This is also launch program to kick off the Japan Pavilion as well. Yeah, thank you very much once again for joining us.